Welcome. Thanks for coming. I know there's lots of places that you could be, lots of other webinars to go to, but I'm really excited for our panel tonight. Before I dive into that, a couple of quick announcements. First of all, this talk is going to be recorded, so for those of you who missed it, have to drop off early or what have you, this will be on our YouTube channel. I'll drop that in the chat later. Second thing, get your questions ready. Put them in the chat. As soon as we're done with our initial conversation, I'll start calling on everyone. If you'd like to join the conversation, and we encourage you to, please go ahead and raise your hand. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see the hand raise button. We want this to be a nice casual conversation. We want, the best way is for it to be nice and interactive. So definitely feel free to join. These guys have graciously joined to answer all the questions that you guys have about data science and all the roles that you could have and what you need to learn and all this kind of stuff. So really excited. With that, who is Promotable? So I'm the founder of Promotable. We're a professional development platform that teaches the data skills required to do your best work now and become promotable in the future through industry-created, expert-led, mentor-driven, hands-on training. So we do events like this every single week. At events like this, we invite data experts and business leaders to share their expertise so you can network, learn actionable tips and techniques, and move your career forward. We also offer virtual live online training programs for those of you who want to take the next step in becoming promotable. So the first one is our most popular course. It's our Data Analytics for Business course, which is great for business professionals. You might be in marketing or finance or product. You want to take your career to the next level. You don't want to become a data scientist, but you want to be enough to be dangerous and learn how to make better data-driven decisions and learn things like SQL and Tableau. And the second is our newly launched Data Science Accelerator. So this, in partnership with 1871, is an income share agreement-based program, live online, fully immersive, and closes that gap between learning and that first job by going beyond the certificate. We've got top-notch instructors who are all current data science practitioners and hiring managers. We have a team of mentors who are all current practitioners as well, who are dedicated to your success and give you that insights you can't really get elsewhere. And then, of course, we help you connect the dots by not having a passion project, but connecting you with real companies, like established companies who are everything from multi-billion-dollar companies to growth stage and startups. So ultimately, you walk out with something that you can actually is valuable. You can show and actually shows what you can do and connects you with real companies. And of course, it's all backed up by our job guarantee. So you don't pay us until you get hired. So if you want to learn more, go to promotable.io. Feel free to reach out to me, Aaron@promotable.io. And with that, I'd love to introduce our speakers. So we've got Shravan. He's in analytics at Slalom. So really cool stuff. You'll get to learn about what it's like to work at a real company or a real company, a kind of more in-house at a company versus on consulting type projects. So really interesting. Then Shem, we have he is the head of data at Way.com. Prior, he was at a bunch of companies. Most recently HIPAA, was at Uber, was at PayPal. So really deep experience, and so I'm really happy that they're here to share that knowledge with us. And so with that, we're going to kind of dive in. I think the easiest place to start really is, to talk about, I'd love for each of you to kind of give me, introduce yourselves, talk about, what you guys do, kind of what your role is. And then we'll dive into the next question will be the kinds of, for a junior data scientist or, someone coming through a boot camp or a master's degree, what kinds of titles do you apply for? What kinds of jobs do you do? And we already started talking about this earlier. What's the majority of your time kind of spent on, especially initially? And then, what kinds of things do you need to learn quickly to kind of get to the next level? So I'll let you guys take it from there.
Cool. Why don't I get started and then Shravan, you can go after. Thanks, Aaron, for having me on. So I'm the head of data of Way.com. So Way.com is a financial platform for your car where you can save money on stuff like your car parking, insurance, gas, and a few other stuff. So they're a Series A startup based out of Silicon Valley. And most of the work that I do here right now is in building up data infrastructure so that we can power all of the analytics all the data science models that we will need once we become a big company. Prior to this, I was doing sort of a similar role at Hippo Insurance, which is also a Silicon Valley company. And before that, I was a data scientist in the product team at Uber. And before that, I was at PayPal, doing a bunch of different analysts as well as data science roles. So yeah, that's me and Shravan.
Yeah. Hi guys, my name is Shravan and I'm from New Jersey and I work as an associate consultant in data and analytics domain at Slalom. Slalom is a modern consulting firm focused on strategy, technology, and business transformation. And we get to experience a lot of client across different industries, including pharmaceutical, manufacturing, financial, public sector, and many more. I'm mainly focused on data and analytics and visualization, and often I play roles like data architecture and business analyst based on the project requirement and client requirement. And I have good experience around pharmaceutical companies and public sector as I live in New Jersey, and Slalom works as a local model. We have a lot of pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey, so I'm mainly in that. And previous to this, I have a year and a half experience in a company called Optimal Solutions. It's a very small company. It was like 10 to 15 people, and it was a research-oriented company. We did a lot of R&D stuff with U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Air Force, GSK Pharmaceutical, and many other cool clients. Yeah, this is about me. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. Well, I think just an easy kind of quick question. For a lot of folks here are going to be coming in fresh out of a coding bootcamp, or they're thinking about it, or they went through an analytics master's degree, or what have you. When you've learned all this stuff, what kinds of stuff do you apply for? Is it just data scientist, or are there other kinds of roles that you end up with? And given your title, there's lots of stuff. So take it away.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are all kinds of roles, right? So there are like around 15 to 20 titles which has data in it, and also some roles don't have data in it, but still they are data roles. And we can broadly categorize into like business oriented completely, and technical, and hybrid, like which includes both of them. To name a few, if you consider like a pure business understanding perspective, there are roles called as business analyst or engineer who mainly deal with setting up dashboards using tools like Tableau, Power BI, and they have good sense of ETL and good sense of SQL. And then comes digital analyst who are into optimizing the marketing campaign and optimizing website flow to increase the sales, to increase the revenue, to increase engagement. They use Google Analytics. They do a lot of A/B testing, and they do a lot of optimization. So these are the kind of roles which are like pure business. And then coming to like a more engineering or more technological roles, you can say data engineer. Their main function is to do ingestion, structuring, standardization, and processing of the data. So they work around a lot of ETL tools. They have heavy knowledge of ETL pipelines, and programming languages must for them, like Python, Scala, or sometimes MATLAB, and SQL is a must. And then comes product analyst, right? Like Joseph here. So product guys, they do have sense of a data, and they make a data-driven decision to develop product and to increase the engagement of the product. And they do like A/B testing. And I had given an interview for a FANG company. They asked me questions like, how do you measure the success of a product? How do you measure the growth of the product? And what features will you include to increase the engagement and things like that? And then comes a machine learning engineer who is completely technical, who do like all kind of forecasting, time series analysis, and they have good sense of machine learning libraries and Python. And finally, talking about hybrid roles, data science himself. So data scientist, I could talk about data scientist a lot, because previously I worked as a data scientist, and it was a small company, so I was responsible for the complete cycle from from understanding the business requirement, which came from the client, collecting the data and processing the data, cleaning the data, which is like 70% of the work, and then doing all kinds of feature engineering, feature selection, all these things. This is hybrid role, and these are all roles around data.
Really, really cool. I guess the next question, I'm going to lead back into what Shravan was talking about just before we went live, which is like, what is the day job? What does like the day-to-day look like? What do you spend the majority of your time doing? And then by extension, like what would you expect, like kind of, especially someone coming in new, like what is like the biggest, well, two things. What's the biggest pain point? But also like what do you spend, what's like the biggest, most time-consuming part of your job?
Yeah, and I think this is pretty much standard across everyone's experience, is that a lot of my time at the start goes into like data cleanup and munching and just putting together clean data so that I can ingest it and utilize it elsewhere. Unfortunately, when I was starting out, it was more than 60 to 70% of my time. Even the biggest companies like Uber and PayPal have clean data issues and tracking issues and instrumentation issues. So
Is it like a source of truth thing, like where there's like multiple data sets, like when you ask for a number, you get 3 different numbers, or is it?
It's more like they have 3 different definitions of the same thing. Something like conversion rate means something different to marketing versus product versus the VP. Right. And so no one's getting that alignment is pretty critical and usually never happens as the company grows. So fragmentation is a problem. But yeah, so there's a ton of cleanup work that happens. And the rest of the time that I realized I was doing without thinking was just learning about the business through what the data was telling me. And that's often an underlooked portion for someone who's just starting out, which is how does the model that I'm building or the analysis that I'm doing going to matter at the end when someone like a VP is going to take a look at it, and how does it change their outcomes? How does it affect their decision making? And I never made that bridge in my first 2-3 years as an analyst, and only as I got more experience when I was interacting with these senior leaders did I really get it. So those were sort of like the 2 main areas that I was learning the business, but also doing a lot of data cleanup. And some of the modeling and analysis was sort of automatic based on the work I'd done before.
Well, that kind of leads into one of the other questions I had, which is like, I think you guys both might have different perspectives here, but what are the things you like learned, you had to like learn on the job that you wish either like someone talked about or was covered, or like you realize that, oh, actually this is something that's super important, kind of like this stakeholder concept or learning the business, that you think that like is not really talked about enough, but you think folks who are listening should really know about and learn or consider when they're looking at these kinds of roles?
So from my perspective, it's always been like bridging the gap between the business and what a technical person like a data scientist does. Usually, folks that are just joining or even at the highest levels will try to get the best possible model and not the quickest possible one. Sometimes an 80% accuracy is way more than enough. You don't need to spend another week to get it to 85. And so it took me a while to bridge that gap. And I think that's the main disconnect that they never teach in school, which is like, how do you take something that you know and apply it really quickly, where speed is as important as accuracy.
Hey, everyone, welcome. Sophia, thanks for joining the panel. So Sophia's got a really cool background as well. She's at Logitech now, was at Lime, and I'll let her introduce herself. This is what we do when we're late. When I used to do these in person, people would show up and I'd say, "Oh, there's a free seat right in the front."
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little late. I think there was a bit of a timing that I wasn't too aware, but
take it away. Tell us a little bit more about what you do, and we were just talking about right now about what like you wish that you like learned on the job that you didn't really realize until you kind of started working. You're like, oh, this is super important, and they don't talk about it in boot camps or school or whatever.
Let's see. Okay, maybe I will do a short introduction. I think you guys heard already that I was at Lime Scooters, and I'm currently at Logitech Gaming. So I'm their data analyst. That's pretty fun. I kind of lucked into this role since I didn't, and I'll talk about it later. But on the job, what's really important is actually project management kinds of skills. And I think you can pick up that kinds of skills by really just practicing a lot. But it's beyond get a curriculum from a coursework and then you finish it. It's more like you got to figure out your own curriculum. And what that means usually in industry that I realize, it really boils down to one funny thing. Teachers are always telling you, professors are always telling you, read the damn syllabus or read the question and all that. You know what that actually means, or what that translates to an industry? It means, what does your audience want? How do you know their question? Do you understand what they're looking for? And sometimes figuring out what they're looking for is half of the battle, because you don't want to jump into doing a project and then realize that it's not as relevant. So that's probably that one thing that I would say that is important. You guys, I don't know if you guys talked about it, but that's my flash intro, flash answer.
That's perfect, and that's my soapbox. Everyone who's frequently attended these events, Sophia knows, I frequently talk about this concept of asking the question, right, and understanding what you're getting yourself into before you dive into it and waste all this time and all this company money. But Shravan, anything else to add to that, or you want to dive in elsewhere? But what are the things because I think you've got kind of a unique perspective, just because you're on the consulting side. Probably as someone who is pure play data science probably wouldn't hit.
Yeah. I mean, I come from a computer science background, and being a computer science student, I don't want to talk with people. I just want to sit behind the computer and code or do all kinds of stuff. But I don't want to talk with people. But consulting is completely different, right? I mean, you have to face client every single day, and you have to understand emotions. They have to say, this is it. So whatever the requirement is there, in my previous project, my sponsor from the client side told, this is it. You're hitting the right nail. That's all what we want to hear. I mean, we want to understand their language. It's if you go to Germany, you should know how to speak German. And if you are in technology, you should know how to handle business and how to understand business. Same goes with business. If you are in business side, you have to understand technology, at least just to communicate with other people. This is my view about this.
Yeah, no, totally true. And also, guys, feel free to jump in. You don't have to wait for me to.
Can I also add to that? I actually have a story that happened last week. It was really funny about that language thing. Yeah. So I am still pretty new to the industry. This is my second year in the industry. And I was talking to some of my new teammates. So I joined Logitech recently as well. And this UX UI colleagues of mine comes up and then they meet me over Zoom and they're really excited and they're like, can you tell us all about this overlay and that pivot? And I'm just like, what are you talking about? And it turns out they wanted segmentations. They wanted maybe number of downloads per region, per segment, per, I don't know, age, per whatever. And I'm just like, that is not a language that I'm used to. We're talking English, but we're not using the same language. And it was really funny for me to go back and digest. And it took maybe a good 10-15 minutes until they show me a page of what they were working through. And they really thought about it. It's pages of metrics that they wanted. It's just when they say overlay, I'm just like, what? So
you actually asked, right? I think for a lot of people, we don't take that step where it's like, hi, I don't you don't want to be like the person who sounds like they don't know what they're talking about.
By asking questions, especially, take advantage of your first, 60 and 90 days, ask all the questions.
Yeah, that's actually a good point on industry jargon. I think every industry has its unique jargon, and especially if, like me, I worked in 3 different industries at this point. So every time you need to learn something else, it's okay to sound dumb and just ask what it means. And most people don't do that. I didn't do that the first time. I'm now learning to just ask all the dumb questions.
It hits you, right? Because after it's you do what I used to do. like when I was a non-technical person, I worked at a coding bootcamp. I would just nod my head and like, yeah, I totally understand. And I did a lot of Googling, and I realized if I just like raised my hand and said like, what are you guys talking about? It would save me hours and hours of time, and then embarrassment when they thought I knew what I was talking about when I didn't. So a couple more things. So Sophia, do you want to kind of like dive into, because I think you have a super interesting background in the sense that you kind of moved into tech from academia. What was that process like? What was like the trigger when you were just like, hey, I'm ready to do this? And like, what do you think from your, and maybe there wasn't one, but I have to ask, right?
No, that's a fair question, and I really do expect this. So I was in grad school attempting a PhD. Didn't work out. I was pretty heartbroken over it because I thought I was ready to look at and chase mosquitoes for the rest of my life. I did mosquito flight biomechanics. It's pretty specific. And that is, but given that I was trying to understand mosquito flight using math, I actually picked up a lot of coding that way, right? Mm-hmm. And so at first it was just doing sort of phylogenetics, so mosquito evolution and how does their wing shape changes through their family, or like the family history, the species history. That actually taught me a lot of R. And eventually also, because I was doing image processing, it went also from MATLAB to file organization stuff. So that's brought me to Python. And so I ended up having exposures like that. And so by the time I hit my advisor were like, need to get out. I'm like, oh, okay, what do I do? That's when, it wasn't that when, but it was also a time for me to sort of self-reflect and say, well, what's my next step? So I had two leanings, two inclinations that I knew to chase. One is, I actually like talking to people a lot. I'm a very socially driven person in general. So this whole work from home is really hard, but getting used to it. So that's one inclination. Yeah, so that's one inclination. The other one is I want to talk to people, or at least I want to talk to more people than the 5 people that are going to read my paper and not be so excited about it. And I want to also, I know I had hard skills to sell that were in data. And then again, now it goes, how did I transition? That actually ends up going back to that first point. I talked about the whole language and the industry knowledge and all that stuff. I started attending a lot of these kinds of meetups. And because I'm based in the Bay Area, they were free in San Francisco, I got to visit a lot of like headquarters, Reddit headquarters, Travel Advisor, Coinbase, a bunch of these. They host these events for free. And not only you get to meet people who maybe are in the same path, maybe a few years ahead, you also meet recruiters on site who are like, we're here to actually, sometimes they pop up in the beginning or at the end, they're like, we're hiring. And that didn't get me anywhere. I'll tell you how I got in there in a bit. But the key for me to come into these events, sometimes it's not even necessarily to find a job. It was even just to learn how to speak the language. Mm-hmm. And so for those who have also an academic background, have you guys heard of interdisciplinary research? Can you think of the equivalent for business?
Let's ask the poll here.
Or tax. It's like a pop quiz, I'm sure once I say, you're like, of course.
Yeah, let's see.
Right, it's not.
That's a lot of no's.
No, do we have people also typing?
Change the no yeses so you can watch the numbers move.
Fun to see that.
So, I think the answer is no. Please tell us. Please tell us.
I was seeing if there are. Yeah, so the equivalent to something like interdisciplinary research, if you think about it, is cross-functional projects or cross-functional stuff like that. It just means between different group of people in a department within maybe a school or industry or like organization, you will have people from different departments working together. That's it. So words like that, it's also, I started translating things that I knew from stats to how do I talk stats to people in business that makes sense to them. And so essentially throughout, I knew that I was seeing these fun comments. So that's sort of how I picked up the lingo. And I also took a couple of Udemy classes, and I also read a bunch of Medium stuff, and I don't know, a bunch of random stuff. And the way I finally broke in is I also applied widely to different roles. I didn't know people didn't know how to interpret my background. So how do I help them do that? And it came down to me reading the job description more than the role title. So among them, it's like business consultant and then marketing analyst and credit report manager. Like that was a really out there one that they brought me back to do an interview. Didn't get it. And getting to Lime was me actually applying to internship as well. I was within that 1 year period of me graduating. And so I applied. This one was a cold apply. It was really funny. People ask, how do you get your next job? If it is the first job, I apply widely, and I also had about, I want to say, 1 interview per month, and they kind of equally split between me co-applying to a bunch of places, me talking to a friend who referred to me, and me going to meetups and then finding someone who might or may not be looking for jobs. So I had maybe 12, 13 interviews the first 8 months. So, and then I then found the co-apply to the internship for Lime, and they took me. That was D1. It's like, of all things that I did, that one hit, and I don't really know why. People say it's kind of a numbers game, and I do think so. It's like, right time, right place. And I feel that about this role, my current role as well. So from internship, because I knew I'm not a student, I think within the first or second month, I was like, I'm going to spend time looking for a next job because I'm not a student. I'm not going back to school. And so they were like, okay, be a full-time. So that's sort of how I got in here.
Cool. Yeah. No, that I think a lot of people will probably be able to relate at least like part of that. I guess the last thing I'll ask before I open it up to questions is what is it kind of like? You had like your first data science job, and Sham, you might be the person to lead this conversation. But like, what does it mean to go from junior level data person to like the next level up, or even onto like what's the difference between like data scientist or analyst and like manager? Like what kinds of like how do your responsibilities change, and what things do you have to learn to level up like that?
Yeah, so there's a few different paths. I wouldn't say there's one unique path for everyone to move up in, but in my world, it was sort of being more of a generalist than a specialist, which means for some of us that's and I found this very hard, is just letting go of being super technical all the time, which is to say your depth of knowledge decreases as your breadth increases because you just don't have enough time to spend on the same thing over and over again. And so as I moved up into managing teams, I had to learn a lot more about marketing analytics and finance and how operations work, and how does the P&L get balanced and that kind of stuff, and making decisions based on that, which made me less in touch with sort of the most recent Python scikit package or something like that, right? So for me, it was more about learning to be more of a generalist than a specialist. But I've seen my peers go super deep into, I'm just going to be the expert in one type of modeling, or I'm just going to be at Facebook for the next 7 years working on their newsfeed and researching on that kind of stuff. So there isn't one way. But when I'm looking for folks to hire on my team, I'm usually looking for people with a breadth of experience, because I feel like someone who's done the transition of moving one set of skills from one industry or location to another can always adapt and learn with whatever I can throw at them. And so I tend to lean more favorably towards the generalist, probably because I'm one too. But that's sort of how I've evolved.
Yeah, that's fair. Would you guys say that that also is like something that's like super important in terms of like that, like adaptability? Was that something that's like important for you guys as well, or do you think it's more important to be like a specialist, really good at this one thing, and that's the thing that gets you? Or maybe that's just what you enjoy. Hands down, being doing this and telling people not to bother you.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right answer to that. I think it's more personality based than sort of and situation based, right? Like if you just find one role that you're deeply in love with and you just want to keep exploring that, that's props to you. That's good for you. But for someone that's looking to lead teams and go up vertically on the data side, I would recommend that they pick up sort of the other generalist skills like project management and communication and how to bridge gaps across different functions, both speaking their language as well as your own. So that's more valuable than being a specialist.
Yeah, what I found I find when someone like really knows their stuff and also like loves data science, it gets to the point where it's like less about salary, and they're just like they're kind of one of like the perks of having the job that I have right now is I get to talk to really cool people who do a lot of cool stuff, and I'll get like the director level, and they're just like, no, it's even better than money. Like the problem is interesting, and I'm like, that's how like you love it, and you're probably pretty good at it too. And to dive into some of these questions, Matt from JP Morgan asked, he directed it at Shyam, but I think it's a question that's open for everyone. What role does RPA, robotic process automation, play in helping resolve some of like the data cleanliness or management issues that you were talking about? Is that so significant? And I will let you dive into it, but I suspect it's very different depending on like, if you're like Uber, PayPal versus like where you're at now.
Yeah, you pretty much answered the question for me. It's like, I don't think if anyone that's even like a mid-sized startup is using RPA for data cleaning at this point. But as the bigger companies might be, I don't think even when I was there, Uber was doing much.
Can I ask a new question? What is RPA? Is that like ETL or not?
No, it's robotic process automation, which is essentially maybe Matt can answer it, but essentially using robots to automate your work.
So like looking at your process, so it's like someone submits a ticket, it goes like, who sees it, where does it go, where does it get routed? So like consulting companies come in and like their bread and butter, they're like digital transformation money is like they come in and they map this out. A lot of times this means like having like stakeholder interviews and like a time consuming process. A faster way of doing it is to put a little bot on everyone's computer and it just watches what you do. And then from there, they can see where it goes, and they can see, like this is the most time-consuming stuff. How do we make this more simple or reduce complexity? And I sound like I know a lot about this. I've been like doing a deep dive, so I'm like asking my friends about it. Now it's meditating, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Here we go. Matt just let's bring that on. Let's bring on the expert.
Hey guys, hello. Hey guys, how are you? No, Aaron, you said it much more succinctly than I could. It doesn't replace ETL, but it automates the criteria that would go into an ETL. So instead of somebody serendipitously running into you in a lobby when that was a thing, say, can you run this SQL query and get this data set for me? There would be a bot that would do that.
Cool.
Basically, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm gonna drop you off, and then feel free to raise your hand anytime. And if I don't see it, just drop it in the chat and let me know if I'm not missing it. There it goes. He's gone. Okay. So I think that's that. Let's see what's next. Matt, I have a follow-up question, which I didn't realize, so apologies for kicking you off, Matt. He asked if or when, like, do data scientists, or we'll say data science practitioners at large, spend less time cleaning and more time refining judgments for decision-making? I'm not really sure what that question means. But I think here we go. It's coming back. There we go.
Basically,
I think his question is, will there ever be a point where you're not doing
it's 60
more of data cleaning?
Yeah, exactly. So doing more science and less maintenance, effectively. Because is it just a glorified bunch of ETL queries and actually analyzing information, or at what point is that going to be the main focus of the job? Because right now it seems like it's not the case.
So I'll answer it succinctly, which is the size of the pie will increase. If you just spend more time refining it than you do on the ETL, then you're actually spending more time refining it. That's the essence of it. I do foresee in the future a ton of this becoming more automated with more sort of monitoring on the data side to prevent unclean data and unstructured data from seeping in. which will sort of reduce this initial effort, but it's not going to go away. You just need to invest more time in actually making sense of it than you do in cleaning it.
That's fair. Shravan, what do you think? I know you've seen like different size companies given like, the projects that you do. Do you notice that like RPA is like a big thing, or is it kind of like depending on like the size of the company, or what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, it completely depends upon the company and the field you're working in, right? So I was working in chemometrics and spectral analysis. So those things, I don't think so. Even RPAs can automate those things because you need like a chemist or you need like a research person to understand the bandwidth to understand the signal. So if he says that okay, from 1300 nanometer to 1600 nanometer, we have the good signal. It is the good signal because they are the expert in it, and they have written tons of paper. They have patents. So we work closely with them to do the data cleaning, and it's a spectral data. It's like 1700 columns and like crazy number of rows. So to clean such data, you need to read papers. You need to understand the spectroscopy and everything. So it ultimately comes to you are feeding the data into the model, right? So you want it to be the level of like how do you want it to feed? It completely depends upon you. Because if you are feeding into a linear model, you want the data to be a certain way. If you're feeding into non-linear model, you want the data to be a certain way. So it's understanding emotion, right? So I think I understand that emotion more than RPA because I'm gonna feed that data into model. This is my take. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Okay. Next question goes to Linnell. Drop you off, Matt. Here we go, Linnell.
Hi, thank you so much for presenting and giving us some great information. One question that I have, because I'm a recent graduate of one of these boot camps. So one question that I actually have is, do you have any tips for preparing for the technical interview? That's one of the things that I know it's like there's so many questions you could be asked and you could Google it, but is there anything that you would maybe suggest to people like me who are just starting out?
Yeah. So I'll take this question because I'm fresh out of college too. I graduated in December 2019, and I know this part. This is quite difficult, and the hit ratio. I mean, as much as you apply online, you don't get that many interviews, and it's not that motivating. It all happens, right? But before getting that one interview out of 100 application, you want to make sure you are completely ready to give that interview. It's like hitting the dartboard. You should hit the red eye whenever you get an interview. So be prepared and like practice lead code and practice Kaggle, because Kaggle is a great platform where you can just extract data and start working around it. And there are like 15 to 20 people already have done it, and go to each and every notebook and look how they have done it. Try to understand their psychology, like how did they approach the problem, how did they clean it, how did they process it, how did they model it. So you actually understanding 15 ways to do the same problem than trying out by yourself. Try to look at that and then try to pick the most optimized step in each of the code and start implementing it in different data set, and try to understand multiple like functionalities and multiple industries, like how do they work. For example, like if I worked in like 3 pharmaceutical companies and they work slightly different, but the main funda is same. So try to understand how industry is expecting you to be, and what you don't need to understand the language, obviously. I mean, when I change client, I don't know ABCD of client. I start everything from the beginning, but at least you have to understand how the business is running. And from the technical preparation, practice lead code every day. Do a lot of Kaggle, and if you feel like okay, data scientist is a big jump for me, try to aim roles like business analyst or business system analyst, where you get in touch with the data, but you're working closely with a data scientist or a PM, and you will understand the business requirement, and then try to do a slight transition from business analyst to data analyst or data science if you feel like fresh out of college, data science is a bit difficult. Yeah, this is my take. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything to add to that, or can I go to the next thing? No.
I think he covered it pretty well.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Linnell.
Thank you.
Thanks for always attending as well. I have started to recognize your face, which is I'm the worst with names, but I get faces. So
you and I are the same thing.
Yeah, like I'll remember like your face, something random about you, and I'll never know your name unless I see you like 15 times. But anyway, okie dokie. Let's see. Next question. So Jin Young asked how, this might be a toughie, but how like a data analyst role would be compared to like an actuary at an insurance company. I assume it's just really math heavy. I don't know if you guys have or know anything about actuaries or like insurance roles, but
so I can take that. In terms of skill set, it's not that different. I've seen actuaries employ both Python, R, and sort of the core skill sets that you would think of as like data science skill sets. One, to become an actuary, I think you have to take a licensing exam and pass a few things. And two, they're specialists, right? They sort of go deep in sort of risk management and risk identification, and making sure they weed out bad characters when they're writing policies. Whereas data analysts could be doing anything from like product to marketing to finance to anything across the business, like sales optimization or something like that. So that's the main difference I've seen. But in terms of skill set, we're the same. I work closely with actuarial teams in both creating insurance products just through like the models that they've written and I've sort of helped them with. But I'm not a licensed actuary.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I remember we had a company, their business was basically being actuaries who approached Promotable about like training some of their staff. So it's like super math heavy, but yeah, you're right. That is what they do, right? You're not going to be a generalist. You're not like, you are going to like do a deep dive into that. You're going to be really amazing at it. And that's that. Next question came from Karen. So she's asking, so she's someone who's transitioning from like some sort of like analyst work and PM. I assume she means product manager, but she could be meaning project manager, and I'll just wait for her to correct me. But she's asking, how much does an employer realistically expect you to hit the ground running versus learning on the job? And what is that like dichotomy or
Can I take this question?
I do, yes.
To answer the question directly, it's actually very dependent on your team, your manager, and then the expectations. So this is why they say that in interviews, one thing that you should ask, or once you get there, or you should ask, what are the expectations? What are the day-to-day things like? And even when you're on board, it's like, what's the idealized 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan? Like, I'm not necessarily always framing it like that, but at least I think some conversation about expectations is always useful. And let me give you two contrasting experiences, the two that I have, because I onboarded twice so far in my life. At Lime, I came in as an intern, but within the first week of me onboarding, I was given a data set. It was independent, so it was relatively clean. But they told me, hey, we need to do some analysis on like performances of the fleets. Can you do it by Friday? Oh, and by the way, we're presenting this to the CEO. I'm like, oh, okay. Great. And that scene in Iron Man, or was it like one of the Marvels where he's like, since when did you become a nuclear scientist? And he goes, last night. That's how I felt about the statistical method that I ended up using that first week of onboarding. And this is not without guidance, of course. I spoke to my manager about different methods, kept in the loop, and they didn't have the team had other people working on other things, and I was free, so they were like, here, you do this. Now, on the other hand, at Logitech, when I onboarded, well, also, first of all, is work from home, so things are a little slower, and my work laptop didn't arrive until 2 weeks later after I onboarded, or I started my job. And again, it's nature of the project as well. And as I was interviewing, I already knew that my project was going to be somewhat like more long term, more like metric development, more. I am doing some deep dive, but more than anything, I am trying to get a holistic view of where everything is for this particular like group. So, given the nature of the project itself, it's the expectations are quite different for each of my experiences. Now, as for technical, let's see. Sorry, what was the question back there? It was hit the ground running. Yeah, as for like the whole hit the ground running, let me just quote a colleague from a call this morning. I Stack Overflow all the time is what they said, and I will agree with that. You know, once you build enough of a background, enough to like learn a lot of read code and understand what's going on and be able to explain it yourself, I think for the most part you can pick up a lot of things fast. If you already went through boot camp, you know, if anything, that proves that you can learn fast. So I think it's, you know, Aaron mentioned earlier, adaptability is important, and I'm on that thought too, because even for Lime, I barely was able to have time to practice SQL, and all the SQL that I did, all the nested stuff that I learned, and all the, you know, how to do everything, I actually really picked it up at Lime. Like, so, and again, I also have that because I knew Python and R and other things. So
work smarter, not harder, right? Once you have the foundation, I think the point is, speaking of coding people, we've got, we'll see if he's on the event, then I'll just be embarrassing myself. But one of our instructors, Milan, he most recently was at Groupon. Now he's doing something else really cool. But he would say things like, and it was totally right. It's like, someone else has done this, guys. Let's, like when he was teaching our classes, like, someone else has done this. Like, let's go and see, you know, Stack Overflow. Like, Google is your friend, Stack Overflow is your friend. Go look, go see. And then, you know, obviously don't just copy paste, like try and see what they're doing and why, but it's a good starting place, right? And I find that like students are always shocked when they ask a question and they find their instructor going to Stack Overflow. But I think that's like a really important skill. So we don't shy away from it, but yeah. Anyway, next one, I know a couple of you talked about this, so we'll just reinforce it. Iris was asking how you connect the technical skills and business acumen for for new people coming in. She's like, I'm trying to pick up all these tech skills, but then relating industry jargon, especially switching industries. Is there any sort of like technique, or how do you guys do it when you're approaching kind of making that switch?
I can take it, which is just ask all the dumb questions. I don't think anyone, especially when you're starting out, is going to judge you for asking too many questions, whereas you might suffer later on because you don't know what they mean. And I know it sounds more like a cliche answer that someone just gives you, just to ask all the questions that you can. And your manager probably told you that as well, but there's no better way. I've tried going around and Googling and reading books and that kind of stuff too. It just takes way more time, and you end up with sort of like a half-baked answer rather than what's exactly specific to your role in your company. The other thing that sort of helped me was to start talking to more teams that were working with my team, and sort of understanding how they viewed my portion of the business. To give an example, which is if I was in product and I was working with a marketing guy, or if I was working with like a finance person, they had a different view of my vertical than what I had. Yeah. And that sort of helped me piece together what sort of the outside world was thinking about product in general. Yeah. And they're more open with their feedback, and sort of, since you're not directly connected to them, you can ask them a little bit more questions without, sounding dumb. So
I'll throw this out.
Those are the two things I did.
Yeah, I have a follow-up, actually. You started from a really good point. First, start from where you're at and talk to people where you're at. Now, I have a couple of suggestions in addition to that, because I think your first approach is great. Personally, I started also, so I mentioned, networking, talking to a lot of people, right? But kind of zoom in and zoom out. So if you're in tech, what are some common tech jargon? So I found out about this. This is what I went to grab earlier. It's called lean analytics. It's based on the Lean Product Playbook series. This is more product manager kinds of things, but I do think this is pretty useful because it goes over like 3 or 4 business types, and it gives you a very high level, like they don't tell you how to do the formula, but they tell you which metrics are they looking at that works for this type of industry versus this other type of industry. So I think even as like a big picture framework, this helped me. This is one book that helped me. And then you can be more industry narrow or industry focused. And one split that I often see, or maybe I should say 3. So 3 because there's hardware. So you can develop a hardware product. The metrics are going to be different. The timeline is going to be different. Then you can develop software, right? And then software then can further split into software as a service, SaaS, and then your app, like what everyone thinks of when you think of tech. That's the fast one. That's the lean product analytical one that everyone talks about. So I don't know, like, so in addition to talking to people directly in your industry or the industry you want to get into, also I think zooming out a little bit and be like, what's the language that everyone in tech is talking about? I think that's my approach.
Yeah, just like reading some of the blogs. After you read a few, you realize that it's all the same thing over and over and over again. But to know that, you have to read it, and once you know that, then you're good to go, right? But I love Shem's point about just like asking someone, hey, like, what do you think my job is? I had to do that with a bunch of engineers, me being super not technical, and the answers are always really interesting. I found that happy hour helps. You get to be a little bit more formal. But part of it's just like learning. Like it's like, hey, like I don't want to be a dick here. I just want to learn more what you do, so that like if I'm asking for something, I'm not wasting your time. But likewise, I want to know what that looks like from your end, and then you get to actually have that conversation. Some people are more amenable than others to like being frank about that. So I'm sure there's like office politics or whatever involved, but when you can find someone who is actually like upfront, it's so refreshing, and you can really learn a lot. But it helps if you come in and do some of the homework. So like I went and read stuff on Stack Overflow that I had no idea about. I'm like, no, I think it seems like this. Does this make sense to you? Can you explain it to me? And then they're like, oh. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then you kind of force them to simplify it. And then, they learn how to teach, which is nice. But also you get to learn things. And there's a little more mutual respect, which is always helpful. Here we go. Bridget is asking, and this is, we've got time for one more question after this, guys. So get your last question in. I live in an area where without as many local tech job opportunities in the U.S. Midwest. Where in the Midwest? What would be the best way to network virtually rather than in person, even after COVID, when people are going to start doing more in-person stuff? Wichita. Thanks, Bridget. That is an excellent question. Do you guys want to talk about how to connect?
I have thoughts, not experiences, unfortunately, but I have thoughts from talking to friends who are in a similar situation. So before I address the actual question, I don't think the general state of work from home is going to go away. So that I think plays out in your favor. With that said, I think you're in the right direction. It's at the end of it, it kind of depends on what you want. It's like, do you want for your job to be more local, or do you want it to be remote? I know that for a fact that our company has started to hire remote more frequently now, for example. And the other thing is, I personally have been attending these type of events in different states. I think my most out there one was maybe like last year. I attended a women, data, and wine in Georgia, like Atlanta somewhere. So you never know who you're gonna meet. There's also a couple of resources for women, I think, in the group if you're here as well. Tech Ladies is a pretty good one. I know that they also have events. They have co-working events and speed networking events that I found mentors that way. I found friends that way randomly, and it's like sometimes it's all about just talking and learning from each other. So that's sort of my 3 cents, 4 cents.
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, you're right on 2 points. One, I think remote work is definitely not going away. I'm a cynic, so companies have saved too much money, and take that with a grain of salt as it is. But also, I mean, it was really smart people who don't live in like big cities, right? And so at the end of the day, I think companies, as they realize they want to find more talent, they're starting to do that. So, and put yourself out there, right? I mean, it's harder. It's a lot harder, right? Let's not sugarcoat it. But coming to stuff like this, coding in wine in Georgia sounds great. Maybe more the wine part, but that's just me talking.
To add to that, like my previous company was completely work from home before the pandemic too. So I worked like 1.5 year work from home, and my colleague was in Vermont. He was in Burlington. He had a big farmhouse. He was living there, all good and near the national forest. And then my another colleague was in DC, and my boss was in New Jersey, and even I was in New Jersey. So there are many small companies who do completely remote work. So you can look for those companies, like try to ask them like, can I do remote or something? And even my CEO was a remote employee. So yeah, I mean, look out for small companies and startups. I mean, you might get a completely remote startup.
Yeah, startups don't care, or some do, some don't. Actually, it's not entirely accurate. But I mean, like I have a good friend who's got like a Series A company, and they're almost totally remote. Some of them are locally in the area, but all the engineers are all over the place, and even the non-engineers at the end of the day. And that was pre-COVID. Now, obviously, it works. But excellent. Thanks for all that stuff. Yeah, there's last thing we'll leave everyone with. What things should everyone be reading? I know we've kind of thrown some stuff out there, and I love that. I know Sophia mentioned some stuff. I know, Shravan, you threw your Medium article on there. Guys, follow the Medium article. Read as much as you can. But is there something that, is there like one blog or something you guys like to read that you think is really helpful? Whether that's to understand the business jargon, or more for data stuff, or for breaking in and doing interviews, or whatever you guys think is valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to attend TED Talks like on YouTube, obviously. So there is this one guy who tells about who talks about data storytelling. So attend his sessions, and he's great. And even like Aaron himself like does this amazing events. This is a great place to start and get to know a lot of people who are already in the industry. And listen to product school classes and their talks. They do like a year event with amazing product guys, and they explain a lot about product and data science stuff. And go there, and there are many TED Talks around data science, which will definitely help you to speak in the interview. You can take those points and you can write them down, and with your experience, you start adding them and start making a good conversation.
In the chat, we've been throwing a lot of towards data science. Is a really good one. I'm throwing our YouTube channel in here as well. For anyone who watches Scott Adams' talk, he had a more technical version of that on towards data science. Really smart guy. I think we've got it. Any other last minute things to throw in here, guys?
The only thing I'd add is I shared a blog by a person who used to work at Google, and it's called Occam's Razor, and he has a great blog post on sort of how to visualize data, as well as how to, in general, work in data, specifically on the marketing as well as digital analytics side, because that's more his forte, but sort of the concepts are general. So I love that guy. His name is Avinash Kaushik. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, some people are just like amazing data visualization people. Like it almost feels like they don't have a real job and they just make really fun data viz things. But things they do are fascinating. You could tell I'm a nerd. Anyway, we're going to end it with that. Thanks everyone for coming. For everyone who sees our stuff on LinkedIn, please go ahead and give us a like, or on YouTube or what have you. Really appreciate it. It's all helpful. Guys, we do these every single week, so really appreciate everyone coming. I'd love any additional feedback, stuff you guys want to hear about, what have you. Feel free to email me personally. Always, if folks in the audience would love to, you guys have some experience and you want to join panels like this, always looking for new guest speakers, feel free to ping me, and we'll take it from there. Thanks for attending, guys. We'll also be hanging out in the tables, so feel free to stick around and say hi. With that, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me on, Aaron.
Of course.
Bye.